Las Vegas, 1972.
Cameras flashing, microphones crowding his face. When a reporter asked Elvis Presley if he still loved Priscilla, the king paused mid-sentence, then gave an answer so raw it left hardened journalists speechless. What he said next wasn't rehearsed. It was confession, heartbreak, and grace. All at once. August 18, 1972, Las Vegas Hilton Ballroom. The air shimmered with heat and nerves. Over 200 reporters packed the room, their flashbulbs firing like tiny explosions. Elvis Presley walked in wearing his white high-collar suit, rhinestones catching the light like fire. His diamond cross glinted as he took his seat at the front table. The king looked flawless, but up close you could see the cracks. His eyes were tired, the kind of tired that no amount of sleep fixes. The divorce had been finalized only 2 months earlier. The papers still sat in a drawer at Graceland. "Mr. Presley, over here." Questions fired from every corner. About his new show, his health, his music. Elvis answered with charm. "Well, I'm just trying to make a livin', honey." The room laughed, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Behind the laughter, there was tension. The crowd wanted one question answered, the one nobody dared to ask. Until a young reporter from the Hollywood Times raised her hand. She couldn't have been older than 25. Nervous but determined, she spoke over the noise. "Mr. Presley, do you still love Priscilla?" The laughter died instantly. You could feel 200 hearts stop beating at once. Flashbulbs froze mid-blink. Even the air conditioner seemed to hold its breath. Elvis looked up. The charm fell away. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if the words had knocked the wind out of him. The microphone trembled in his hand. He could have joked. He could have walked out. Instead, he lowered the mic and leaned back, staring into the crowd as if trying to find an answer inside all that noise. The crowd leaned forward, hungry for anything. Scandal, emotion, humanity. What would the king say about the woman who once ruled his heart? Elvis took a deep breath. The silence stretched like a wire. Sometimes silence is louder than a scream. What would you have done if the world demanded to know your heartbreak? Would you hide it or face it head-on? He cleared his throat. "That's a mighty personal question," he said. His voice soft, measured, dangerous in its honesty. But he wasn't done. He set the microphone down gently. Then he looked at the reporter again. Really looked at her. The girl swallowed hard, realizing she'd just crossed into sacred ground. Elvis leaned forward, elbows on the table, the flashlights catching the sweat on his forehead. "I guess the truth is," he paused, "there's some things you never stop feeling." The crowd gasped. Pens froze mid-note. Cameras clicked in slow motion. He looked down, then up again. His voice was lower now, rougher. "You want the truth? I think she'll always be part of me." The words hit the room like a wave. Quiet, heavy, unstoppable. And in that stillness it became clear. This wasn't the king talking. This was just a man trying not to break in front of strangers. He leaned closer to the mic, eyes shining. "You can't stop loving someone just because life gets complicated."
A camera clicked.
Somewhere in the back row, a reporter whispered, "Did you get that?" A single tear slid down Elvis's cheek. He didn't wipe it away. He looked out over the silent crowd, hundreds of people who suddenly saw him not as a legend, but as one of them. The flashbulbs began to fire again, but slower now, gentler. Elvis gave a small nod, as if to say, "That's all you're getting tonight." He set the mic down. And for the first time that evening, the king of rock and roll looked human. He could walk away, or answer more. The ballroom stayed frozen. You could almost hear the hum of the air conditioner and the faint click of a camera being reloaded. Elvis still hadn't moved. The microphone waited in his hand like it weighed 100 pounds. He looked down at the table, then back up at the sea of faces. For the first time in his career, he seemed unsure of what came next. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "that's a mighty personal question." A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd, thin and awkward. But he didn't smile. The light above him caught the edge of his collar, making him look both brilliant and fragile. Reporters leaned closer, pencils hovering. They expected a joke, a deflection, something easy. But Elvis didn't blink. His lips parted, and the voice that had filled arenas suddenly sounded small. "You want the truth?" he said, almost whispering. "I think she'll always be part of me." For a split second, no one moved. Then the flashbulbs went off all at once. A blinding storm of light. The line wasn't defensive. It was vulnerable. It was real. He shifted in his chair. You can't stop loving someone just because life gets complicated. The words hung there, delicate but unshakable. Somewhere in the back, a man coughed, and even that sounded disrespectful. Elvis looked down again. His knuckles whitened around the microphone. "We had a life together, a beautiful one, but sometimes the road keeps you from home more than you ever mean it to." A pause. Then softer. "I hurt her by being gone. That's the truth of it." No one wrote anymore. They just watched him, watching himself unravel with dignity. The woman who had asked the question lowered her pen, eyes glassy. She hadn't expected to make him bleed. Elvis glanced toward the doorway where his manager stood motionless. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't for the cameras. "People think fame fixes everything," he said. "But fame can't hold you at night." The room inhaled together. It sounded like wine through dry leaves. He took a sip of water, the glass trembling slightly. "You all write stories about stars," he said. "But stars don't shine without burning." A photographer's flash went off, catching the tear forming in his right eye. He didn't wipe it away. That single drop said more than any lyric he'd ever written. Then, as if remembering the world beyond the stage, he straightened his shoulders. "She gave me a reason to try to be better. That don't end when the papers say it's over." Someone whispered, "He's still in love." Maybe they all were, with the idea of someone who could speak pain that plainly. He looked at the reporter who had asked, "Does that answer your question?" She nodded, unable to speak. Elvis smiled softly. "Good. Then maybe we both said what we needed to." The crowd stayed silent. The moment was too sacred to fill with noise. He stood, adjusted the microphone, and said, "You folks wanted a story. I guess you got one." A quiet laugh this time, gentle, respectful. The kind people give when they know they've just seen something human. As he turned slightly toward the stage lights, you could see the glint of moisture still on his cheek. He let it stay there, shining under the flashes like proof that even kings cry. He glanced toward the exit, then back at the audience, as if deciding whether to walk out or keep going. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't telling the truth. The staying in the room after you've told it. When does love really end? Or does it ever? He drew a slow breath, set the mic down again, and whispered just loud enough for the nearest recorder to catch it. "Next question." A reporter from Rolling Stone broke the silence. His voice cracked slightly. "Elvis, do you blame fame for what happened?" Elvis exhaled slowly. The question didn't surprise him. It haunted him. He leaned into the microphone, his voice low and calm. "I blame myself for a lot of things." Cameras clicked again, softer this time. "I thought being on stage would keep me alive," he said. "But after every show, I'd come back to the hotel room and it'd be quiet. Too quiet." He looked up toward the ceiling, remembering something distant. "I used to call home after concerts, just to hear her voice. Even when I had nothing to say. Sometimes she'd answer, sometimes she wouldn't. That's how you know love's in trouble. When silence starts answering the phone." A few reporters glanced at each other, unsure if they should write it down. This wasn't the kind of quote you printed. It was the kind you carried. He continued, "When you're gone 200 nights a year, even love gets tired. Priscilla tried. Lord, she tried. But loneliness is heavier than any Cadillac I ever owned." That line rippled through the room. You could almost feel it settle in everyone's chest. Elvis looked at his hands, the same hands that had held a million microphones and still couldn't hold a marriage together. "The truth is, I didn't lose her because I stopped caring. I lost her because I stopped showing up." A sound escaped from the back of the room, a stifled sob from a woman reporter. Elvis heard it, nodded gently, then smiled sadly. Guess we all been there, huh? He looked around. You all see me up here and think I got everything. But sometimes the more people clap for you, the lonelier it feels when the music stops. Flashbulbs lit up his face again, catching the faint shimmer of sweat on his forehead. Graceland used to feel like home, he said softly. Now it just feels big. He paused. You know what the worst sound in that house is? The echo. After a tour, I'd walk through those halls, and every step sounded like someone leaving the... No one spoke, not even the photographers. The tape recorders whirred quietly, capturing every word, every sigh. He adjusted the microphone slightly. I've made mistakes. I chased applause when I should have chased peace. And now I'm learning. Applause don't hug you back. A single reporter, maybe trying to lighten the mood, asked, Do you miss her? Elvis looked up, meeting his eyes directly. Every day, he said simply. And not just her, the man I was when she loved me. He leaned closer, voice trembling. You all ever look at someone and realize you broke something you can't fix? That question wasn't meant for the reporters. It was for himself. He swallowed hard. The songs, they ain't just songs. They're memories. Every "Love Me Tender" is a prayer I never finished. He looked at the front row. You ever notice how a broken heart still keeps perfect time with the beat? Maybe that's why music never leaves you. It forgives you before you forgive yourself. The crowd didn't applaud. They didn't dare. For a moment Elvis looked younger. Not the king, not the icon, just the boy from Tupelo trying to make sense of fame and loss. He leaned back in his chair, whispered something too quiet for most to hear. I just wish she knew I'm sorry. Then, as if sensing he'd revealed too much, he looked up sharply. Next question, he said, but there was no strength in it. Only fatigue. The room stayed still, heavy with compassion. Outside, the hallway buzzed faintly with distant applause from tourists who didn't know what was happening inside. In here, something sacred had cracked open. What would you give to undo the moment you hurt someone who once believed in you? Elvis looked around the room one more time. Faces blurred by light, by emotion, by the weight of what he'd just confessed. The king nodded slightly. All right, folks, he said, his voice faint but steady. Let's talk about redemption. For a moment, nobody dared breathe. The press room smelled of sweat, flash powder, and something heavier, truth. A gray-haired reporter at the back, Frank Delaney from Life magazine, cleared his throat. Elvis, are you saying you'd take her back? The question cut through the silence like a spark. All eyes turned to the king. Elvis blinked slowly. Then, for the first time all afternoon, he smiled. A small, tired smile that didn't hide the pain. No, sir, he said softly.
I'm saying.
Take me back. The man she married, I lost him for a while. Gasps rolled across the room. The words felt rehearsed by his heart, not his mind. He leaned closer to the microphone. When you're out there night after night, it's easy to believe the applause means you're doing fine. But applause don't mean peace. A pause. She used to tell me, Elvis, slow down. You're running faster than your soul. I didn't listen. The reporters were motionless. Every flashbulb seemed to wait for permission. Elvis went on, voice trembling but clear. I hurt her by being gone too long, by thinking fame could fill what love once did. But it can't. Fame feeds your ego, not your heart. He stopped, eyes wet, breathing uneven. If I could tell her one thing, he said, I'd say thank you, for reminding me that being loved once is still a blessing. A chair creaked. Then, unexpectedly, someone began to clap. One pair of hands. Then another. Within seconds, the whole room was applauding. Quietly at first, then louder, like a wave building strength. Elvis bowed his head, overwhelmed. The applause wasn't for the legend. It was for the man who had finally let his crown fall long enough to be real. He chuckled under his breath. Y'all are making it hard to stay composed, he said, wiping his eyes with the edge of a napkin. Frank Delaney stood again. Elvis, he said. That wasn't an answer. Elvis looked up, a glimmer of humor returning. No, Frank. That was a prayer. Laughter broke through the emotion. Gentle, cleansing laughter that made the air lighter. He continued more freely now. You know, I used to think love was something you owned. But it ain't. It's something you're trusted with. And if you don't treat it right, it goes looking for someone who will. His words landed like scripture. People think heartbreak is failure, he said. But sometimes heartbreak's just love teaching you manners. A ripple of smiles moved through the crowd. Even the cameramen seemed mesmerized, lowering their rigs for a better look. Elvis glanced toward the back where a young assistant stood, notebook trembling in her hands. "Miss," he said kindly, "write this down. Don't spend your life proving you're right. Spend it proving you can be kind." She nodded, eyes shining. He leaned back, running a hand through his dark hair. "I don't need the world to forgive me," he said quietly. "I just hope my little girl knows her daddy tried to be better." Someone whispered, "Lisa." The name hung in the air like incense. Elvis's voice softened even more. "Every song I sing from now on, she'll be the reason I give it all I got. Maybe that's redemption enough." The room erupted again. Not in loud cheers, but in the rhythmic sound of palms meeting. Steady, reverent. A flashbulb popped, freezing him mid-smile. Tears on his cheeks. Microphone shining in front of him. That photo would appear in newspapers around the world the next morning. Elvis stepped back from the table, glanced once more at Frank Delaney and said, "We good now?" Frank nodded. "We're good, son." Elvis gave a soft laugh. "Then maybe I can sing again." He turned toward the exit. Reporters rose to their feet, still clapping, many of them forgetting they were supposed to be impartial. As he reached the doorway, he stopped, looked back over the crowd and said, "You tell her. Tell everyone. I'm grateful. That's the headline tonight." And then he was gone, leaving only the echo of applause and the faint scent of cologne in the air. What if humility is the loudest form of strength? What if love's real legacy isn't keeping it, but thanking it when it leaves? The cameras kept rolling on an empty chair, because no one could bring themselves to press stop. The applause from the press hall echoed down the carpeted corridor like waves fading on sand. Elvis walked fast, head low, the sound chasing him until the door shut behind him. Backstage smelled of hairspray, coffee, and the metallic tang of stage lights cooling. His friend Charlie Hodgage was waiting beside the mirror, arms crossed. The room was small, lined with gold records and ghostly reflections of the man who owned them. Charlie tried to joke. "You sure know how to quiet a room, E." Elvis set the microphone on the counter and sighed. "Didn't feel quiet to me. Felt like confession." He peeled off his rings one by one, laying them neatly beside a half-empty glass of water. His hands shook slightly. "You didn't have to say all that," Charlie murmured. Elvis met his eyes in the mirror. "I did. Maybe it's the only honest thing I got left." For a moment neither spoke. The air conditioner hummed. From somewhere down the hall came the faint roar of an audience at another stage, living the same night but in a different world. Elvis turned toward the dressing table. A small silver frame stood beside a jar of hair gel. Lisa Marie between her parents, all smiles. He picked it up carefully, thumb brushing the edge. "She gave me the best thing I'll ever have," he whispered. "That's enough for me." Charlie's reflection softened. "You think Priscilla'll hear what you said?" Elvis shrugged. "Doesn't matter. Sometimes the truth's not for them. It's for you." He reached for a towel, dabbing the sweat from his forehead, eyes distant. "People think I live for the stage," he said quietly. "But lately I sing to remember who I was before the lights." He set the frame down, adjusted it so the child's smile faced the mirror. "That little girl's my compass now. If she grows up kind, maybe I did something right." Charlie smiled. "You still got heart, E." Elvis chuckled softly. "Yeah, but it's cracked in a few places. Makes the music sound better, though." He walked to the piano in the corner, touched the keys like old friends. The first note rang out clear and lonely. Then he hummed the opening line of Always on My Mind. The sound carried through the door. Crew members outside stopped moving, listening. Even the hallway lights seemed to dim. His voice, rough from emotion, filled the little room. Maybe I didn't treat you quite as good as I should have. He closed his eyes. Each word trembled like a memory. When the song ended, he sat still, staring at the reflection that no longer looked like the world's biggest star. Just a man learning piece one note at a time. He whispered, almost to himself, "Guess that's my prayer for the night." How many of us realize what matters before it's too late? Outside, someone knocked gently. 5 minutes, Mr. Presley." Elvis smiled faintly. "Tell him the king's gettin' humble," he said. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked back toward the noise. The door closed, leaving the piano humming with the last note of Always on My Mind. By morning, Las Vegas was already buzzing. Hotel lobbies played radio loops of Elvis's press conference like it was breaking news from another planet. Every newspaper on the Strip carried the same quote in bold letters. "You can't stop loving someone just because life gets complicated." Taxi drivers talked about it. Bellhops repeated it to tourists. Waitresses in diner uniforms tucked the line into small conversations between refills of coffee. Across the ocean, headlines appeared in London and Tokyo before the sun had even risen over Memphis. The Daily Express called it Elvis's most human moment. In Japan, fans left flowers outside RCA's offices with handwritten notes that simply read, "We understand." Inside the Hilton, Elvis slept only 2 hours. He woke to a knock at the door, Charlie holding the morning paper. "Your front page everywhere," Charlie said. Elvis rubbed his eyes. "Front page or obituary?" Charlie smiled. "Front page, brother. They heard you." Elvis took the paper, scanned the headline again, and whispered, "Maybe they finally saw me." Downstairs, the hotel phone lines jammed with reporters requesting follow-ups. But Elvis refused every interview. "Let the words speak," he told his manager. "If I start explaining they'll sound like PR." That night, during his second show at the Hilton showroom, the crowd of nearly 19,000 felt different. Quieter. Kinder. They weren't screaming, they were listening. When the lights dimmed, Elvis stood center stage, microphone in both hands. He looked out over the sea of faces and said softly, "This one's for anyone who ever had to say goodbye the right way." Then he began, "You gave me a mountain." His voice cracked halfway through the second verse. The crowd didn't cheer. They waited, holding their breath with him. Tears rolled down his cheek as he forced the final line out. Raw, trembling, real. When the song ended, he didn't bow. He just whispered, "Thank you," and walked off stage to an ovation that felt more like a prayer than applause. Backstage, he sat alone, breathing hard. Charlie entered quietly. "You okay?" Elvis nodded. "Yeah, just finally felt something true again." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Maybe that's as close to forgiveness as I'll ever get." The tape from that show, recorded by a stagehand on a small reel-to-reel labeled Vegas Night 2, August 19th, 1972, still circulates among collectors. You can hear the moment his voice breaks. You can hear the silence that follows, a kind of collective empathy between a man and 19,000 strangers. By sunrise, bootleg copies were being passed hand to hand across Nevada. Fans wept in cars, truckers played it on radios during long hauls, and DJs announced it as the sound of a legend remembering his heart. Even Priscilla heard it. A friend later recalled her saying, "That was the Elvis I fell in love with. Not the star, the soul." She didn't call him. She didn't have to. Some messages don't need replies. Elvis returned to Graceland a week later. As he stepped inside, he found a letter waiting at the front door. No name, no address, just the words. "You reminded the world that love is never wasted." He smiled, folded it once, and slipped it into the frame behind Lisa's picture. "Do apologies have to be accepted to set us free?" He looked around the quiet house, whispered, "Guess not," and turned off the light. Decades later, the footage from that 1972 press conference resurfaced online. The film was grainy, colors fading into gold and dust. But the sound was clear, the trembling voice of Elvis Presley answering a question about love like it was scripture. Millions watched, not for gossip, but for the honesty. Younger fans saw a man they'd only known as an icon suddenly become human, vulnerable, gentle, brave. You can see it in his eyes. Regret, grace, and a kind of peace that comes only when you stop hiding from your own heart. Clips spread across social media, captioned simply, "You can't stop loving someone just because life gets complicated." Comment sections filled with people telling their own stories. Lost loves, old mistakes, the people they wished they'd called back. The king was teaching again, but this time without a stage, without lights. At Graceland, tour guides now pause beside a small glass case near the main staircase. Inside lies a silver microphone engraved with the words Las Vegas Hilton, August 18, 1972. Below it, a tiny plaque reads, "Where Elvis Presley reminded the world that love, even lost, remains sacred." Visitors stand quietly there, phones down, heads bowed. Some cry, some just nod like they understand. That quote became more than an answer to a reporter's question. It became his redemption song, a message carved from pain, delivered with grace. Even now, 50 years later, when radio hosts play Always on My Mind, they often follow it with the same line. You can't stop loving someone just because life gets complicated. It's strange, isn't it? How a single moment, just a man, a mic, and a truth, can echo longer than any concert ever could. Elvis didn't just stun the press that day. He healed them, and maybe, in some small way, he healed himself too. Because in the end, love wasn't his weakness. It was his legacy, whose name still lives quietly inside your heart, long after goodbye. If this true moment of honesty moved you, share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do isn't to hold on. It's to say thank you and let go with love. Subscribe for more untold stories of legends who turned pain into grace.